And we're back here on the Analyticaliowan podcast. It is Wednesday, December 17th, as you are listening to this. And as I say all the time, we've got a lot to talk about because there's always a lot to talk about with this administration. Now, tonight, Donald Trump is going to be addressing the nation at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And uh, I will do TikToks and address it on tomorrow's podcast once we know what this address is going to be about. But there's no shortage of speculation. Now, the White House, for its part, is not really saying what Donald Trump is going to be discussing. He apparently is going to be discussing everything that they've accomplished over the last year and what's to come. Now, what does that mean? We don't know. In part because um, they haven't really accomplished that much. If you look back at the last year, what have they really gotten done? Their biggest accomplishment was passing the one big beautiful bill, which was just a tax cut or an extension of tax cuts to the very wealthy. Didn't really get anything accomplished, didn't really do anything, um, and didn't really fix any of the numbers. And with Donald Trump screwing around with all of the tariffs, um, he's wrecked the economy. So I don't know what wins he can be crowing about. Maybe he's going to be crowing about the actual war crimes he has committed, although they're not really war crimes because we're not at war. But if we were, they would be considered war crimes, where he's just blown up boats in uh, the Caribbean, claiming boats are going from Venezuela to the United States that he claims they are drug boats, but we've got no evidence. The correct procedure with these boats would have been to let them hit American waters and then have the Coast Guard intercept them and search and seize anything that was contraband and charge anybody on the boats with the crimes, not just blow them up. But we've been blowing up boats, seizing oil tankers, and when it comes to doing all of that, that leads other people to speculate that part of his address is going to be a declaration of war against Venezuela because apparently he has got ships down there. He's blockading um, Venezuela, talking about seizing oil tankers, um, that we are going to continue to seize oil tankers until we have, and this is the part that doesn't make a lot of sense. He said that we are going to um, take back the oil that they stole from us and the land that they stole from us. Well, I don't know what land he is talking about. And the response online was pretty much everybody making fun of him for saying that Venezuela stole our land. That never happened. So I don't know what land he is talking about. And as far as the oil, if any of it was sanctioned against, where we put sanctions on it, does he think that just automatically means um, that he can turn around and seize it, that it becomes U.S. property? Because that's not how that works. But of course, Donald Trump doesn't care nor know how things work. Um, he just does things. And uh, so we don't know what this address is going to be. Now, there is some speculation that it could be because of his health. Now, stopped he was doing a Hanukkah event last night. He had to stop it and brag, looking around for Dr. Ronnie Jackson, the disgraced doctor who lost his law license or his medical license, rather. Who said, he's like, well, where's Dr. Jackson? He goes, I asked him who's the fittest to ever be president. Was it Barack Hussein Obama? Was it Sleepy Joe Biden, or was it Donald Trump? And of course, he said it was Donald Trump. To say that Donald Trump was in better physical condition than Barack Obama or even Joe Biden is laughable at best. It's really it. How does he come up with these delusions? But he genuinely believes that he is the best there ever was. He thinks he has still got the body of a 20-year-old, that he is in this peak physical condition that he's just not in. And he addressed. Now, some people are thinking he's going to be making an announcement about his health if he's going to resign. I don't think he's going to do that. I really don't think he is going to resign unless Republicans have gotten to him and have decided that he needs to resign because they are going to impeach and remove him. And you would have to, it'd be very hard for Republicans to convince him to resign. It really would, because his personality does not fit um, the type of person who would run away. You would have to convince him that he would be going down. Not only would he be impeached and removed, um, but that he would be facing jail time, and the only way to get out of any of it would be to resign and get a pardon from J.D. Vance. And I just don't think he is mentally there anymore that you could convince him of that he would be able to accept that he did something wrong, because that's just not where he's at. Now, narcissists do tend to run away when they are faced with insurmountable pressure. That is true. And that is something that could happen, but I don't see it happening. I don't think he's going to resign. If he were to use his health to resign, that would be something, but that would also mean Donald Trump would have to admit that he is much worse off than he would ever want to admit publicly. Um, just a few things they have admitted tells us that his health is far worse than what um, it actually is. The fact that they even admitted that there is a vein condition um, speaks volumes, because Donald Trump wouldn't normally admit that he even had this vein condition, um, because he wants you to believe that he is the fittest person that ever lived. It just tells me that there's a lot of problems, and now he's admitting to having taken cognitive tests and all sorts of things. There is a problem with his health. There really is, but I don't think you're ever going to get him to admit it, and not enough that it would make it so that this is what the announcement is going to be when he addresses the nation. So he's going to be addressing the nation, and we don't know what it's going to be. We really don't. We'll have to see which way he decides to go with it. Um, and this could just be a puff piece, him trying to brag about all of the things he has done, and it could be him just trying to clean up um, his comments from last week when he was at this rally in Pennsylvania that kind of backfired. He was at a rally in Pennsylvania, and of course, he was talking about how affordability is a Democratic hoax. Things are more affordable, and well, Christmas may be a little tight for some Americans. And well, instead of getting your child $37, they may have to only get one or two. Well, I don't know very many people who are out there buying their kids $37 for Christmas. I don't know where he got that number, if it's just a number, if it was the first number he thought of, or if that is something that he himself would do, trying, when his kids were young, trying to buy their affection. It's entirely possible that that is exactly what that is a reference to, that's what he used to spend on Tiffany and Ivanka. Um, and who knows what he ever did for uh, Don Jr., Eric, or Barron. But it's entirely possible that that's what he meant. He's going to try to clean that up. And this comes on the heels of bad job reports numbers. Now, they didn't release a jobs report for uh, October, but unofficial data is saying we lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 115 to 120,000 jobs in October, something like that. But we came out and they announced positive job report number for November, and that number comes out to being like 67,000 jobs. So that means over the 2-month period, if that is all correct, he's underwater, right? I mean, he lost twice as many jobs in October than what November gained. And this is what you're going to see out of this administration going forward. Remember, he fired the head of the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, all because they put out jobs report numbers he didn't like. They revised other numbers down that made his numbers worse. And that is something they do with the jobs report numbers. They send out these surveys, and if they don't have all of the information back, they use their estimates when they put out the numbers at the end of the month when they compile everything. And then if they get more data later on, they adjust the numbers. They do it all the time. But see, they adjusted it in a way Donald Trump did not like. So he fired her, called her incompetent, said she didn't know actually how to do the numbers and all this, and came up with put a loyalist uh, in that place. And now they're fucking around, only releasing the positive numbers. This administration is only going to release numbers when they are good for Donald Trump and find reasons to not release them when they are bad for Donald Trump. He just wanted somebody in there to control the narrative. That's all Donald Trump has left. That's in part why he is suing the BBC. Now, there is a lawsuit filed in Miami from Donald Trump against the BBC saying that he was defamed by the BBC and he wants $10 billion. Now, I don't think this lawsuit's going to go anywhere. Now, I'm not an expert on British law, but apparently, according to a couple news articles I've read on it, there's a limit of like $300,000 American, and it's whatever the equivalent would be in British pounds, but it comes out to about $300,000 American. Um, that is the most the paper could pay out under law, and I don't know how that would work with a judgment from an American court. But he's going after 10 billion. Now, 300,000 to most people is a lot of money, but to somebody like Donald Trump, it's a drop in the bucket. Now, why is he trying to sue the BBC? Well, he wants a quick buck, and he is trying to get a quick settlement, an apology, and he's trying to scare the other networks into falling in line. If the BBC agrees and just pays him off like other American networks have already done, then other networks he goes after are going to go, oh shit, even the BBC paid him off. We should follow suit. We should do the same thing. And then watch what we post about Donald Trump. This is all about maintaining control and controlling the story, controlling the narrative, and being on top of everything that way. Um, Donald Trump is desperate to control that story because he wants to present himself in a certain light to the American people. If he's unable to do that, um, and the truth actually comes out, it makes him look bad because, well, he is bad. But see, he'll never admit that he has done bad things for this country or that his policies have hurt people. And he doesn't want the media coming out and saying stuff like that about him or his policies. He wants to be able to control what they say so that everybody has the same view of him that he has of himself. Now, one of the big stories we are watching is the Affordable Care Act subsidies. And there was a break overnight in the Affordable Care Act subsidies. There have been more defections from the Republicans. And they have enough votes now to pass an extension of the ACA. And I believe it is a 2-year extension, which is what I think is actually going to happen. I think ultimately they are going to pass a 2-year extension. But Mike Johnson's terrified. No, they were working on the final debate for the bill and a final vote for the bill in trying to move it forward. And the vote wasn't done yet, but in order to close the language on it and move things along. They were voting on it, but the vote wasn't over, and they were going to continue tacking on some amendments and do some changes and things like that. And before everybody had voted on it, and when it was favorable for Republicans to close the vote, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson does just that. He called the vote over when it was at 200. It was either 204 or 205 Republicans in favor of moving forward, and there was like 203 or 204 against. Um, and if they would have voted against it, they would have given them some more time to continue debating and moving forward with this bill. Now, I'm not entirely sure what that means as far as what the final wording of this bill is, because that was going on not long before I started recording here. But I think ultimately the House of Representatives passes a 2-year extension of the ACA subsidies. And why do I say 2 years? Well, because it makes sense. Okay. If you go 2 years, that puts you out past the midterms. And hopefully the midterm elections aren't going to be all about the Affordable Care Act subsidies. I don't think the Republicans in Congress and Republicans running for Congress want to end up having to answer for that. Okay. They don't want to have to be asked questions all the way through the midterms about Affordable Care Act subsidies and insurance costs rising for millions and millions of people. Now, uh, if they don't extend them, I think just it turns the midterms, which were already going to be bad for Republicans, um, where I think they could lose the House by 40, 50 seats, easy. If they let the ACA subsidies expire, and you're talking about, you know, 25, 30 million Americans losing health care, that could turn from uh, losing the House by 40 or 50 seats to losing the House by 50 plus. It could change things from an outside chance of losing the Senate to they definitely lose the Senate. So I don't think the Republicans are going to end up letting the ACA subsidies expire. Now, if they go with a 1-year plan ends up being a problem because now all of next year, all of midterm season, all of primary season that we're getting into, because the first primaries are about 3 months away, is going to be dominated by stories of and reporters going, well, the ACA subsidies expire at the end of the year. What's your stance on the ACA subsidies? What's your stance on the ACA subsidies? It still may be a thing with if they go 2 years, um, that that's what happens. But it's easier for them to play it off and say, well, you know, we got all of next year to figure it out. I want to advance fixing the Affordable Care Act or replacing it or whatever they want to say, right? They can do that. Um, they can come up with something. They can say, well, we got plenty of time. If they're staring at it, maybe potentially running out right after the election, it is going to be bad for Republicans. And if Republicans get slaughtered in the midterms, they have no reason to extend the ACA subsidies then and let them expire and say, well, Democrats are back in charge in January. They'll get when because it'll be right after the first of the year when people's insurance goes up. Maybe we can give the Democrats the blame, but that's not going to work. Um, too much has been made about Republicans letting the ACA subsidies expire, things like that. Now, Donald Trump wants his plan. He doesn't like the idea of extending the ACA subsidies. He wants to go with something else, something more like a health savings account that you can just give people money. I've heard numbers anywhere from $1,000 to $2,500 a month, or a year, um, and that would turn around and they would say, okay, one-time payment, there you go, spend it on healthcare. Now he thinks, because he has never had to worry about paying a medical bill in his life prior to becoming president, when he would have a health related issue, he'd just go to the doctor and he'd pay cash because for him it was a drop in the bucket. He has no frame of reference of what it means to need healthcare and to be dependent on your health insurance, to be tied to your employer's health insurance, something like that. He doesn't know what any of that means or how that works. And they want to go with that plan. Now, I think what they could do is they could convince Donald Trump to give them 2 years. And how? Well, you pat him on the back, you tell him he'd be a genius for extending it, and say, "Look, we agree with you. We want to go with this other plan. We want to go with your idea, but we need more time to make sure we write it in such a way that it's going to work. It's going to be successful." So they turn around and they're going to have to convince Donald Trump to go with it. And I think ultimately they will. I think they will be able to convince Donald Trump to go with a 2 year extension. Now, uh, it sounds like they had to use another discharge petition, and this is just showing how far um, Mike Johnson has lost control of the House of Representatives. The discharge petitions typically don't work. Um, Very few discharge petitions actually get brought to the floor for a vote ever. And when they do, a lot of times, yeah, they finally pass, but they may die in the Senate or whatever. They don't really become law. They've only become law like a handful of times in the last almost 100 years. But see, with Mike Johnson, this would have been like the third or the fourth discharge petition. I think this is the fourth one in the last 30 days that will have been brought forward and actually had a vote on the floor. Now, as we're recording this, there is a chance that they have already passed the ACA subsidies. That's what they were trying to get a vote on. Now, I don't know what that's going to look like. So obviously, keep an eye out for TikToks and or um, a podcast tomorrow where we talk about how that vote happened and what it's going to look like in the Senate. Um, but Donald Trump is worried, right? He knows he's got to do something on healthcare, and him coming out and saying things like, "Well, just go out and buy your own healthcare. You know, if we give you the money, go out and get your own healthcare." Where does he think people are going to get it from? Like I said, he has never had to deal with insurance companies. Not until he became an elected official did he have anything close to an insurance policy, and they get 100% insurance paid for by the U.S. taxpayer. So all he's ever known is, oh, you need health care? You need to go to the doctor for any reason? You just go to the doctor and it's covered at 100%. Now, one of the things I'm seeing Republican leaning creators talk about, MAGA leaning creators talk about, and because a lot of this comes down to whether or not, undocumented immigrants deserve healthcare or immigrants in general. And even though federal law already prohibits um, undocumented immigrants from gaining access to Medicaid and other things like that, even the ACA, Now, some states may have laws that allow for state level funds to be used for those same purposes and to allow um, people who qualify who may not be U.S. citizens to get access to health care. Um, some Republicans are saying, well, hey, Democrats, hey, liberals, how about instead of giving undocumented immigrants free health care, how about free health care for, you know, American citizens? And they're so close to the point that they are that we would be actually in favor of that, going to some kind of universal health care, Medicaid for all, Medicare for all, whatever you want to call it. Um, and the biggest couple of the biggest hurdles when it comes to doing some kind of universal health care plan is that people don't understand what we mean. Okay, they don't. There's people on the Republican side, when they hear free health care, what they think that means is that you go to the doctor treats you, and that's the end of it. And that nobody gets paid ever. The doctor doesn't make any money, the pharmacy doesn't make any money, nothing. There is a group of people that actually believe that's what we're advocating for, and it's not. What we're advocating for is a nationwide healthcare plan, basically, where you wouldn't even necessarily need an insurance card. But for the sake of argument and the sake of doing things the way we've always done it, you would get some kind of a card. Um, or maybe they track it with your social security number, whatever. And you go to the doctor. Let's say I go to the doctor, right? And I need to go see a doctor here in my town. Well, I would show up. They would run my social security number, or run my card, whatever method we chose to go with, and I would go see the doctor. And when I would leave, there'd be no copay, no payment, no nothing. I know, double negative, but you know what I mean. I wouldn't owe anything. And then because I went and just saw a general practitioner, let's say that number's $100. Simple math, right? Okay. Everybody like me that just went to go see that doctor here in town got $100. But if I decide I don't want to see that general practitioner anymore, that family doctor anymore, I want to go see one, a town over because they got a, you know, bigger hospital, better facilities. I go see that doctor. They also just get the $100. They don't get to charge a different rate anymore based on, you know, who they are. There's no network anymore. There wouldn't be a network when it comes to a universal health care plan. You could go see any doctor and you wouldn't have some of the problems that we currently have with our current system, in which you have the insurance companies owning pharmacies, owning doctors' offices and clinics and things like that, and and even hospitals, so that you have to worry about whether or not they're in network. And you could even set up a system potentially, taking it a step further, if you're now eliminating the insurance networks and things, and because everything is in some kind of a centralized payment thing, maybe you set up easier access between all the locations and all the doctor's offices and stuff that would have uh, access to your records, right? So you wouldn't have to necessarily deal with going from doctor to doctor to doctor, depending on what you need, and say, okay, well, forward my stuff from here to here, and okay, well, they've got more records than this place, and trying to remember who knows what about you. Maybe they could make it. Oh, excuse me. Maybe they could make it somewhat better, and somewhat easier on people, um, that way. Or if you need to go see a specialist, I said $100 for a general visit. Maybe it's 150 or 200 for a specialist, right? and you just go, you get treated. They give you a prescription you need filled for whatever reason. Maybe it's blood pressure medicine, maybe it's a painkiller, maybe it's an antibiotic, whatever the case may be. And maybe you turn around and you go to the pharmacy, you get that prescription filled, and that's the end of it. You're done. Um, and maybe we have a copay. Maybe we figure out some kind of a copay system where they go, okay, well, all generics are going to be $5 and all name brands, regardless of what it is going to be $10 or whatever. If maybe who knows whatever they come up with, right? And then we would take the insurance out of it, and there wouldn't be this need for um, any sort of prior authorization or where the insurance could deny you. Well, we don't think you really need that med. Try this other one instead, or something like that, right? Because that happens all the time. You go to the doctor says, I want you on this med. It's the best med to treat whatever your condition is. And I'm sure everybody knows at least one person who has had this exact experience. Doctor wants you on a specific med. You go to the pharmacy to go pick it up, and the pharmacy says no. That's because of the insurance. Insurance needs a bunch more paperwork. And then they've got to get in contact with the doctor. Doctor's office has got to fill out more paperwork as to why they want you on that particular med. And in some cases, even then, the insurance still says no and says, well, we want you to try 4 or 5 or 6 things first before we approve this more expensive med. And sometimes, but not always, there are reasons as to why you wouldn't try the one meds first. Maybe it's an allergy, or um, maybe it doesn't mix well with another medication you're on. Who knows, right? But you got people behind the scenes saying, based usually on cost, that there's a reason as to why they can't do that. And that would all be gone. We could do all sorts of things with universal health care. And the biggest complaints is by people who don't understand it. Now, maybe if the Affordable Care Act subsidies go away and insurance goes as high as what they are talking about, it could end up being a situation where the need or the want for going to Affordable Care Act, or not Affordable Care Act, Medicare for all, or some kind of universal health care just keeps growing, um, because when people's insurance, I'm seeing some family plans, some people are saying, and it's anecdotal, I realize it's not going to be representative of everybody, but like one family, they were talking about their plan was going to go from 500 a month to 2,000 a month. 500 a month by itself for health insurance is insane. Um, why are we paying that much? And those plans even then have some kind of huge deductible or huge copay, right? The whole way, or the way insurance works, is that they want healthy people who are, not using the insurance, who maybe go to the doctor once a year, who maybe fill 2 or 3 scripts once a year, or ever, whatever the case may be, um, to keep paying money month after month after month. So that way, when they pay out for somebody who is actually sick and needs that big, expensive doctor's appointment, who maybe has cancer or a heart attack or whatever, and you got a major medical bill, um, that you turn around and they've made money on everybody else who's healthy, so that way when they spend out for the one person who needs it, they're not in the red. Health insurance has been a scam pretty much as long as I can remember. It's always been about making sure that the insurance company itself makes money, and not necessarily about what is in the best interest of the people who need insurance. But healthcare is so outrageous at this point. Most people are one medical bill away from facing bankruptcy. So something's got to be done. Ultimately, I do think it's going to end up being some kind of a 2-year extension of the ACA subsidies. I think that's where they are going to fall, and it sounds like House Republicans are on board. Now we'll see if Mike Johnson fucks around with it enough and prevents it from happening. But it just shows how weak the Republican Party is really getting. That they're losing control of their own caucus. They can't keep control of what's going on in the House. They can't keep control of what's going on in, uh, to some extent, even the Senate. And it proves what we've said for a long time. Republicans just can't govern. Honestly, their best hope for 2028 is to make a move on Donald Trump. We've been talking about how they need to move away from him and go with somebody else, go with JD Vance. That they need to move away from Donald Trump and then hope that the Democrats take over the House and the Senate in the midterms so they can make JD Vance more sympathetic, saying, well, see, Democrats blocked everything Republicans tried to do. They blocked everything how we tried to fix the economy. Um, so we couldn't fix things nearly fast enough. You need to give us another term. That's going to be their entire playbook for 28. I can already see the writing on the wall. And even if Donald Trump makes it to 28, which I don't think he will, um, it's going to be a situation where that's exactly what's going to happen. That they're going to say, well, see, the Democrats had control of the House and the Senate during the last 2 years of Donald Trump's term, much like what Donald Trump tried to say during his first administration, during his first term, that uh, when the Democrats got the House in the midterms, that see his first term shouldn't count because Democrats ended up with control in the House of Representatives and that they basically prevented him from getting anything done. It was like they stole 2 years from him. Now, Republicans always think it's great when something like that happens, like to Joe Biden. Joe Biden lost control of the House of Representatives in the midterms in 2022, and the Republicans were in charge, and they prevented him from getting nearly enough done because they couldn't get anything across the finish line. Now, Donald Trump comes out and says he was making some comments, I think it was last night, talking about 2028, and he is claiming that a donor has already given him $250 million or something like that toward a 2028 presidential run. Now, I'm pretty sure a single donor, that is way above the single donor threshold. So I don't know how that campaign donation would fall under for legal purposes, but we know Donald Trump doesn't care about legal purposes. And as far as running in 2028, Donald Trump is not going to run in 2028. Okay. He's just not. He's not going to be around in 2028. And in fact, I would be surprised if this donation even happened. At best, it was probably hey, if you do run in 2028, um, when you get to that point, yeah, don't worry, Donnie, I got you covered. I'll give you a $250 million donation. That was probably closer to what happened. Um, but he's not going to be able to run. That's going to get challenged in court and it's going to get tossed out rather quickly. Why? Because it is very clear based on the 22nd Amendment. 22nd Amendment says no person shall be elected to the office of president more than twice, unless they have been previously the vice president or somebody else who has filled in for a president who could not finish their term, and then they have a lifetime maximum of 10 years. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If the people who wrote the constitutional amendment, the 22nd Amendment, if they meant a period of 2 consecutive terms, that's what they would have wrote, because by the time they wrote the 22nd Amendment, um, they saw, or they'd already had Grover Cleveland. He had already been president twice for 2 1-term non-consecutive terms. It had already happened. It had already been a thing. Uh, and they'd already had somebody like Teddy Roosevelt, who had served 2 terms, took a term off and said, "Oh shit, my party's not doing very well. I've got to come back and try to fix it." And then he decides to run for a third term that would have been non-consecutive. Those events had already happened by the time they wrote the 22nd Amendment. And if that's what they had meant, that's what they would have written at the time. But that's not what they wrote. What they wrote was no person can be elected to the office of president more than twice, period. So if they knew what they were writing, and it's just not going to work, Donald Trump will not be around, or he will not be eligible. And I don't think he's going to be around. I think ultimately we've been talking about his health. Um, he wants us to believe that he is in the best shape of his life and he is healthier than anybody to ever hold the office, which is laughable at best if you just look at him. I mean, he's got bruising all over his hands, which looks consistent with somebody who has been getting IVs through the back of the hand. It looks more consistent with that than it does somebody who has supposedly just been vigorously handshaking. Um, but that is the excuse they're going with. Now, some members of Congress that are Democrats have come out and said that they have been told, or they somehow have evidence, but they haven't released it yet, that Donald Trump is getting $26,000 a month treatments for anti-dementia drugs, and that would fit for what he for getting MRIs and having cognitive tests and everything, and it would fit, especially given the bruising and stuff. And it could be any number of things. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's just that they have to put him on something else, some other kind of treatment, whether it's IV fluids, whether it is some other intravenous medication. Maybe it's a dialysis issue. We don't know, and they're not telling us the truth because Donald Trump doesn't want to appear to be weak. We know he is weak, but he doesn't want to appear that way. So that's where that's at. I just don't think Donald Trump is healthy enough to make it to a third term, and I think the Republicans ultimately make a decision to move away from him. We've been talking about that with the Epstein files. Now, as you're listening to this, we are 2 days away from the Epstein file release. Now, this big Oval Office address to the nation, what is it going to be about? Well, it could be about something related to the Epstein files. It could be about trying to for him to get ahead of any sort of report that comes out connecting him to the Epstein files. He has been trying desperately to say he didn't know Jeffrey Epstein, but it's been proven in numerous photographs that he knew Epstein. It's not going to be a matter of did he know Epstein. It's going to be a matter of what did he actually know and how much did he participate in everything Epstein was doing at this point. And he's going to try to control that narrative as best he can. He really is. Um, so that could be part of what he's doing. Again, I don't think he is going to resign unless he is trying to resign ahead of the release of the Epstein files with some kind of a full pardon, trying to avoid the embarrassment of whatever is in there. Because Donald Trump isn't going to want to face whatever connections he has with Epstein and what anything Epstein has done. If he gets some sort of a guarantee that he is going to be out of legal trouble, um, then maybe he makes that move. We'll have to see what this address brings. Um, Now, Donald Trump has been wanting to get the move on when it comes to his ballroom. Well, sort of. We've heard about his ballroom and how that He has already fired one architect. He's working with a second one. First architect said it didn't work out to be as big as what they wanted. It wasn't going to work to be a 90,000 square foot ballroom with the type of design plan Donald Trump had in mind. Um, that it had to be a different game plan there. That they had to build it different. He didn't like that idea. And now he had gotten sued, and he has been sued now by two or three different groups, all about him having the authority to tear down the East Wing. Now, according to Donald Trump, he doesn't need anybody's permission to demolish the East Wing of the White House. He gets to treat the White House like it is his own personal building. That's the way he believes. You know, he paved over the iconic Rose Garden planted by the Kennedys to put a patio similar to what he would have at Mar-a-Lago. Um, he put in those two ridiculously tall flagpoles that we didn't need on the White House lawn when there was already a flagpole on the very top of the White House, which is all you needed. Um, he's done so many different renovations, but he tears down the East Wing to build this ballroom. But then he got sued by a group, by several groups actually, that say he did things the wrong way. He didn't consult the appropriate committees. He didn't do the environmental study and everything. Well, one judge has already heard this parts of this case, and for the time being is not going to um, grant any sort of injunction against the building of the ballroom. However, there are going to be more arguments heard about the ballroom next month. Okay. And during those arguments, both sides are going to be able to present even more evidence. And ultimately, the judge has said that if he believes at that point that um, uh, this group is going to win on their merits and trying to say that he did not have the authority to tear down the East Wing like he did, um, and that it needs to be rebuilt, he could potentially order anything that has already been done to be taken back out and rebuilt back to the way it was. Now, any sort of movement like that would ultimately end up in an appeal by this administration. And of course, Donald Trump would be trying to get it in front of the Supreme Court. And I would caution the Supreme Court, if they do get a case about whether or not this administration can willy nilly just change federal buildings, um, that the Supreme Court building itself could be next. If they're not careful with how they would rule in this, that he would end up uh, trying to do something to their building as well. Now, Donald Trump, for his part, has said, and their administration has filed in this lawsuit, that the um, building of this ballroom is now a national security uh, reason. Um, because, and why they admitted this in court is beyond me. I don't know why they wouldn't have kept this secret. Um, but under the East Wing, there was a bunker, an emergency bunker, a command center, if you will, that was built um, as kind of a oh shit room, basically. It was a safe room. It was a safe area where the president could go. Um, all about continuation of government. All about trying to make sure that if something happened, um, and like in the movie Independence Day, the White House gets destroyed, that even though the building would be gone, the government uh, functions could still take place underneath. It was supposed to be a safe area. Well, apparently, they are going to be doing some major remodeling and major work on that bunker. Now, they have done work on that bunker in the past without disturbing the East Wing. But apparently, whatever they were going to do, they couldn't do it without tearing out the East Wing. And this is one of those things where, if this is all true, and he had gone through the proper channels, you might have been able to get the American people on board with doing at least some of it. But they didn't do any of that. They just went ahead and went forward with it like it was no big deal and said, "Yeah, we're just going to push forward. We're going to do this, and you're going to, we're going to tear down the East Wing. We're going to build this ballroom, and you're going to like it." Well, they're saying because of building this bunker or fixing or renovating the bunker, that it is national security related. Judge isn't entirely buying it. That's in part what this hearing next month is going to be about. But the judge has already kind of cautioned this administration that depending on what gets found in that meeting, that it is entirely possible that the judge could rule that any new construction that has already happened have to be removed if he determines that it doesn't fit and that the president did not have the authority to do what he did by tearing out the East Wing. So we're going to have to keep our eyes on that case as well. Now, Donald Trump loses court cases all the damn time, so it is entirely possible that he would lose that court case. His idea when it comes to the courts is he's always hopeful that he can turn around and get everything in line. He can get it all in front of a judge that's going to see things his way, go with things his way, and then he's going to find the one judge who looks at his obscure version of events and go, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, your way of thinking about whatever this problem is the right way, Donnie." And then he'd be correct and he could move on. It's all about distraction. It's all about delay. It's all about trying to buy himself more time. And none of it's going to work. Last story I want to touch on real quick is we are hearing that the Air Force is going to be buying two more planes, two more Boeing 747s, I think. That the same style of plane that are being converted to Air Force One. There are two planes already in the works. Actually, three if you count the gift from Qatar. Now, we had heard that the first plane out of the original two that Donald Trump had purchased during his first term as part of one of his budgets was going to be delivered potentially in 2027. Now they are saying the time frame is going to be moved up and that he could potentially already have that first plane as early as next year. And that's not counting the plane from Qatar, which they had to pretty much retrofit and turn into Air Force One because Donald Trump wanted something new and flashy. Because at the time of getting the gift from Qatar, they were talking about how the planes that he had purchased his first term may not have been done before the end of this term. And Donald Trump says, well, flying around on 25, 30-year-old planes, that's just beneath me. We need something new. We need something flashy. We need something updated. And he works out some kind of a deal with Qatar to get this jet, and they were going to retrofit it because that was going to be quicker. Now it sounds like Boeing turned on the gas and is actually going to be delivering one of the first planes that Donald Trump had ordered as early potentially as next year. We'll have to keep an eye on that. But these other two planes that they bought are effectively being bought for parts and for training purposes and things like that. As you train pilots to fly them and handle them as they are going to be different than a standard plane because they have so many other security features and all sorts of things in there that a regular plane wouldn't have. Um, and then, of course, you have at some point they are just going to be ending up as parts to keep the other two planes serviceable, so we can get 20 or 25 years out of them. Um, but of course, Donald Trump is just going to be happy to get something brand new and flashy and shiny to actually have that he can show off as a status symbol because that's all he cares about. He only cares about the pomp and the circumstance and about being the center of attention. If he has got a shiny new plane he can show off, um, all the better. So we'll see if he does get a new plane by the end of next year. Um, and I haven't heard anything new on those Qatari plane or that Qatari plane being retrofitted. So, and I don't think the one they are talking about him getting next year is going to be the one from Qatar. Um, they were going to retrofit that, and then he was going to, at the end of his term, transfer it to the Trump Memorial Library. So he still would have access to it after he's out of office. And maybe that is what got Boeing to step up and actually push through and get this other plane done. So that way they didn't have to retrofit the Qatar plane and maybe not violate federal law by doing something like that. Because I don't know if that is actually legal for the president to do. But of course, we know Donald Trump doesn't care about legality. All right, that is going to do it for the Analytical Iowan podcast for today. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me. When I get back with tomorrow's episode, we're going to find out what this announcement was from Donald Trump, what this Oval Office proclamation was, and we'll go from there. So thank you for joining me. I hope you have a great day, and I will be back tomorrow.